Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Faith for Dummies. Hi everyone, hi Izzy, how are you?
Hello everyone, hi Rob. I'm well, thank you. I'm very busy. Me and Rob have just had a very frantic conversation where my brain's been in about 10 different places, but otherwise I'm fine. How about you?
That's right. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I mean, it's lunchtime, so I'm starting to feel a bit hungry. I've got 2 tubs of Pringles to my left, which I'm trying not to eat all of, but yeah.
I have been listening to you chew them down the mic.
Oh no, that's not pleasant. Sorry about that.
It's fine. We're friends. It's fine. Friends listen to each other crunch Pringles.
I mean, it's probably because it's mic'd up, isn't it? It wouldn't be loud normally.
So, Rob, have you got any dummy moments for us this week?
I do, yeah. I have one for me and one for the family. First one is I decided to cook a pizza for Aldi and Lidl. Both do a really good fake away pizza. It's £4. It's got a stuffed crust, pepperoni. Honestly, it's as good as some of the takeaway places. Got that in the freezer, got it out, put it in the oven, took it out the oven just to see what it was like towards the end. So it needed a bit longer. I thought, it's a bit underdone at the moment. And then lifted the pizza up, did the whole classic, left the cardboard on the bottom thing.
Oh no,
yeah.
I've never done that before.
It's a classic dummy moment, I think.
What do you do at that point? Is it baked into the pizza?
It was a bit. I did try to take it off and did succeed. It was a tiny bit pulled apart and broken by that point, but it is what it is. It was still edible. We had it, but just a little small dummy moment.
Nice. Bit of cardboard's not going to hurt you.
Yeah, added texture in it. The other one, my wife was up making smoothies with the boys recently, and she put everything in it, all the fruits, all the frozen fruits, all the milks and dairy alternate milks that we have for various intolerances, and all the added extra good bacteria that you have for your gut system and vitamins and everything. She spent a good long time making it with them. And then in the space of about probably 3 seconds at one point, she was doing this with both boys, and they're 1 and 3, bear in mind. I think it was the 3-year-old took the lid off while it was wazzing, and the 1-year-old at the same sort of motion, I think, put a metal teaspoon in it, and it then proceeded to make this horrible whirring noise.
Oh,
and then she turned it off quickly, all in the space of about 2 or 3 seconds, I think she said. At which point I came downstairs. I didn't hear any of this, but I came downstairs and she's like, I've just had this happen and the spoon is scratched up.
Yeah.
That means there's probably little tiny shards of metal in there.
Yeah.
She's like, I've Googled it. I've read every opinion under the sun. It's like, I just don't think I can risk it. I can give it to them.
Weirdly, I followed somebody on Instagram who did exactly the same thing this
really?
week. And I was just thinking, have you told me the story already? But I knew you hadn't. And I realized this random lady I follow called Grace online did exactly the same thing. And everyone was like, you can still drink it. She was like, there's pieces of teaspoon in there.
Yeah. So I suppose Dan and I might have been able to drink it, but it's just not worth it for the boys, isn't it, when they're that young?
Sad times.
Cool. What are we doing today, Izzy?
So today we have an interview with an old friend of mine called Triona, and we talked to her about neurodiversity and being a Christian, mostly focusing on being autistic. Her and some friends have also written a book about being neurodivergent in the church and how the church can aid those with neurodivergent brains to kind of access church. So it was such a helpful conversation. Triona is such a great person to chat to. She knows herself so well and she knows so much about neurodiversity and access and the church. So it was a really fun chat.
Yeah. And fun fact, Triona and I know each other from when I was at uni.
Yeah, weirdly, me and Rob were actually in the same city at the same time, but didn't know each other because
That's true.
We were not the same age. Anyway, right, let's go to myself and Triona and listen to the interview. So I am here with my friend Triona. We have known each other for a decade now, something like that. Triona lives in London and currently works for a church and does lots of things in the SEND space as well. But Triona, do you think you could just explain to us who you are, what you do, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm Triona. I am a ministry trainee in a church in southwest London. And as part of that, I sort of help out with different youth and children's work. I help out with different pastoral work. And I do training around different needs, disabilities, and particularly autism.
Great. Okay. So what kind of led you into doing that kind of thing? Where did that come from? And how long have you been in that space?
Yeah, so it kind of began when I was born because my dad has a physical disability. So I was aware of the need for accessibility and how that impacted him as an individual and us as a family, different accommodations. And then I had a friend who had a severe learning disability. And we made friends when we were so young that I didn't know anything different of what that meant. But as we got older, I started to understand some of his needs. I met some of his other friends, and I knew I wanted to do something in the world of particularly learning disability at that point, but I didn't really know what. Then I went to university to do drama because I just enjoyed it. And it was while I was there that I found out that I'm autistic and started sort of under my interest of accessibility and disability, looking into sort of neurodiversity theory and what is neurodiversity, what are neurodivergents, what does it mean that I'm autistic, what does it mean for other people. And then I went and worked in disability arts, and after that worked in a school with supporting children with social, emotional, mental health needs. And then I basically was like, but what about Christians? What difference does it make? And what about the church? How can I bring all these things I've learned in my work and in my life and in my own experiences and do something useful for the church, the body of Christ with it? And then I ended up here.
Great. That's amazing. Speaking of church and you being a Christian, how long have you been a Christian? Were you a Christian as a teenager? And in a nutshell, what was that like for you?
I think I was a Christian as a teenager, in that I knew that Jesus had died for me and I knew that I needed that. However, I was so embarrassed to be any different from my friends, and all I wanted to do was fit in. So I didn't like talking about it. I didn't think that I needed to think about it. I specifically remember thinking, you know what, I think Christianity is something that you can be a Christian when you're young, but it's once you hit your 30s, you start taking it seriously. So yeah, I had a bit of a funny view of faith and Christianity until I got to university. It was actually a really pivotal time for so many different reasons. I met other people my age that were Christians, and I joined the Christian Union, and I was going along to a church that was teaching the Bible, and all of this kind of led to the Holy Spirit really working in me and showing me the beauty of the gospel and that it actually does impact the day-to-day life of young people.
Great, amazing. When you found out you were autistic, what was that process like? I mean, that's when I met you when you were at uni. We were in the same town, and I think I vaguely remember you going through that process, or like at least meeting you partway into that process. Yeah, how did you find out, and like how did you go about things like diagnosis and chatting to people and kind of starting to use that language about yourself?
So bearing in mind, I'm very old. I am now 30. So this was like about 10 years ago. At that point, in terms of like autism history, people were just starting to recognize that there could be a female presentation or a kind of high masking presentation of autism. And I knew a little bit from my friend with a severe learning disability and his friends who were autistic with co-occurring learning disabilities. But I didn't know loads about it. It was actually my mental health had really taken a bit of a dive, and I was struggling quite a lot, and some struggling actually in how being a Christian who was so excited and keen over who God was could be struggling with my mental health at the same time. And then I was going to therapy, and it was my therapist who first said to me, do you know, I think that you might be autistic? And I was so shocked. I was like, no, I know about autism. I don't have it. And she said, you need to go and do some research. So then I went and I made a spreadsheet.
I love that.
Which she later said was probably the most autistic response that I could have had.
Yeah. You like suddenly became hyper focused on what autism was and like wanting to learn everything about it.
And whether it was actually relevant to me. And I sort of put like every trait that I could read up about and everything that different women who are sharing their experience had kind of come across, and sort of I was rag rating it. I was going red, amber, green. Do I relate to this? And my spreadsheet told me that I should probably consider that I might be autistic.
I love that you needed a spreadsheet to back up what the therapist had said. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So then also at this point, you know what, I was actually really blessed, and I could see God's hand in it, in that there weren't the long waiting lists that there are now. And I really feel for people on this journey sort of currently, because you do have to wait a really long time and jump through a lot of hoops. At that point, my university was the place that you could go, and they would organise for an educational psychologist to come in and do the assessment. And so I did that, and it was a long assessment. I remember at one point I didn't really know what to say because she went, I can see that there's definitely something going on here. I was thinking, well, is it what we think it is? But yeah, basically she did that assessment and it ended up being quite clear cut that I was autistic. And actually then I didn't quite know like who to say what to, and I was kind of saying stuff to close friends, and then I'd learned all this stuff through my research, and I was thinking, oh, should I be advocating? Should I be taking this on as more of my identity? Should I be not taking it on as any of my identity? And actually, I think I had a bit of an identity crisis, especially when the report first came through. Honestly, anyone who's going through autism assessment and getting your report, please brace yourself for the report. Remember it is deficit based, and like have something nice lined up for after you read that, because the way that they write about you and the things that you cannot do and the things that you struggle, it made me feel really rubbish.
Yeah,
and then I was thinking,
I can imagine that would make you feel like you're failing in all these things when really they're kind of just describing a different way of being, or like things that another person might do that you struggle with or whatever. But yeah, that's hard to read that all together.
Yeah, and even stuff which I was like, well, I just think that's me and I'm quirky and my friends actually like that about me. And then I was thinking, is that just a trait? Like, is my whole personality just a list of traits? Like, is there anything unique about me? And one of my friends who I lived with at the time was like, well, you could just say that about neurotypical traits. Like, what if we just got a list of what makes someone neurotypical and put everything we did into those boxes? Like, would you say that I have no personality? And I was like, no, of course not. And I was like, oh, thanks for the logic. You know how to speak to me. So that was really helpful. And then I actually, you know what? I think it's such an ongoing journey. Like currently I'd say I'm really confident in my autistic identity and my broader identity. You know, my primary identity is in Christ. I'm a child of God, but I'm really not ashamed to say I'm autistic. I've ended up speaking about it all of the time. When I was first working, I didn't used to disclose it to employers because I thought they would have certain ideas about like what that meant, and then it might mean that I wouldn't get a job, or they'd like patronize me, or think that I couldn't do stuff I could, or think that I could do stuff I couldn't. Whereas now, I mean, you can Google me and everything's going on about how I'm autistic and a Christian, so I can't really hide it.
You've really made it your brand. We will talk a bit later as well, because Triona and some friends have written a book about this kind of concepts and stuff about related to church. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, you've really, I think it was you that said to me that you've made autism your autistic speciality, or like the thing that you like really focus on. Your hyper focus.
I think like, sorry. I was going to say, I think that sort of accessibility is like my special interest, and then there's like these subcategories, and autism is like one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of for you, particularly as a woman, I remember, and you said it a bit earlier, like it was definitely harder, particularly in the past, not as much now, I don't think, but it's much harder as a girl to be diagnosed with autism because of masking and social kind of social stigma and the way that girls fit in a way that boys maybe don't need to, and all that kind of stuff. But was there anything in particular that you were surprised by as a woman where you'd thought, oh, that's not an autistic trait, but actually somebody was then able to say, no, I think that's something that autistic girls show that actually boys might not?
That's a good question. I think the interests, the stereotype, particularly when it comes to boys, is like trains, buses, that sort of thing. And actually, at the point at university, I was doing a performance all about accessible toilets, which is a pretty niche interest.
I remember that being your interest, but now whenever I see one, I think of you.
I mean, they're really important. Sidebar, accessible toilets are so necessary. But people would just be like, wow, she just has this passion for accessibility. And they wouldn't necessarily think of that as a restrictive and repetitive interest. They'd just be like, slightly odd, but it's a good thing to care about. Stuff like, oh yeah, this is in my report from my diagnosis. They said I use the way I dress to communicate. And I like clothes, I like colour, I love reflecting how I'm feeling through what I wear and having fun with that. And also dressing for whatever situation I'm in. I kind of view my clothes a bit like costume, and particularly at this point, I think because I was doing drama, everything kind of linked back to that. And so, if I was helping in Sunday school, I had an outfit that I thought looked like I was a teacher. And if I was in the studio and we were doing rehearsals, I had my like drama student outfits. And if I was just like, I don't know, it's the weekend and I was really feeling dinosaurs, I had a dinosaur outfit, I had a space outfit. Like if I was feeling a bit moody, I'd wear more dark and not quite emo colors and stuff, but like I'd wear something very different if I was feeling really like happy and colorful. I'd never thought that was a trait, or that was, I thought fashion was all about people expressing themselves, you know? But apparently the way that my outfits were so set, I wouldn't like mix and match them, was a bit of like an autistic trait of like, I'm using that to communicate rather than words, which, yeah, that's quite an interesting one, I guess.
That's really interesting. If you're feeling fun, you're going to wear something fun, and you're feeling like tired, you're going to wear something tiring. Like, that's so interesting.
I think there was one point where I wore head to toe green because I just really liked the colour green that day.
That's amazing.
One of my tutors was like, you look a bit like an asparagus. And I went, thank you. And took it absolutely as a compliment.
That's amazing. I mean, very niche vegetable to choose. There's so many green vegetables. Brilliant. Okay, so I know that this will be like a really broad question, but is there any advice in particular that you would give to a young person in church struggling to, not that they have to be struggling with being autistic, but struggling to connect in church or connect with their youth work or connect with God, and feeling that maybe that is something to do with the fact that they're autistic?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is begin with God. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. There is diversity in God's creation, and there is diversity in how he's made our brains. Now, being autistic, there are some real joys, and there's stuff that neurotypical people don't get to enjoy, and that's great, and we want to celebrate that. There are also challenges and struggles that are unique to being autistic, and it's okay to feel sad about that, and it's okay to find those things difficult. That doesn't mean that you yourself are broken. It just means your strengths and challenges might not be typical of your peers around you. I say try and connect in with autistic Christians in any way that you can. There's a couple of us out there, and it's really refreshing when you can find people who think in a more similar way to you and maybe understand some of those difficulties. But that doesn't mean only be friends with autistic Christians. You know, neurotypical people can sometimes be empathetic to us and and learn to understand. And I think it's good to talk things through, and it's difficult when you feel that you have to explain the way that your brain is working, and that maybe you're not being rude, or maybe you just don't understand something, or maybe this isn't a misunderstanding. And it's hard to have to keep doing that, but do persevere with it, because if people can understand you, then they can support you. And you can have really good friends of different neurotypes, and you can be a really good example and model of what it is like to have diversity within the church. And you know what? You'll be blessing people around you. Like, the church is incomplete without you there. The body of Christ needs all different people, all different types of brains. And so if it's a struggle, it's okay to voice that, and it's okay to ask people to help you by making some changes to make things a bit easier.
Yeah, thank you. I guess a question, a thought out of that, I guess, is like, once you have explained how your brain works to friends or to a group of friends or whatever, like, actually that those people might then be able to be a better friend to you in the same way as anybody. It doesn't just have to be an autistic person doing that. But like, you know, I have, this is going to sound a bit silly, but I have a friend who's an introvert, and like really, really introverted. And for a long time, people were like, just come out with us, or just hang out, or like, are you sure you're okay? You seem really upset. And to the point where one person invited her for lunch after church, and she just said, I just had too much people time by the end of church, so I will never say yes to an invite of Sunday lunch. But she'd say yes to a coffee another day. And I was like, oh, that's such a good thing to know, because it just means I'm not going to ask you the question anymore. You're not going to feel hurt. Like, I don't feel like I have to. Actually, I'm going to like lean into how you are. And so that's, I guess, the same with any neurodiversity, is once you know something about that person, you can then lean into that, I guess, could be really helpful. Yeah. So I firmly believe that the church's kind of leadership should be the people who are leading the accessibility and looking into accessibility needs for all different kinds of disabilities and neurodiversities and mental health challenges. But if a young person wants to send this podcast maybe to a leader in their church, what kind of accessibility considerations do you think churches should be making, or that young people could suggest or even start themselves?
Yeah, I think so. Something you can do yourselves is, it can be so overwhelming at sort of like tea and coffee time or youth group or all those different settings where there's a lot of people and a lot of noise and a lot of smells and just sort of, it's sensory overload central. And so I think if you yourself are autistic or neurodivergent, or you have a friend who is, perhaps organise to hang out and chat outside of those settings. And that can be where you can build your relationships and get to know each other somewhere a little bit calmer, a little bit quieter, a little bit more comfortable, and deepen your friendship and relationship. And then actually where you then will have a better friendship, you might feel that you can manage some of the sensory stuff a little bit better, because you're then not balancing sensory and social stresses at the same time in that church environment. Likewise, if you're at church but there is a quieter space, go to that. If you're not having to balance that sensory need, you're going to have a little bit more ability to put in the social effort and work through some stuff that's socially challenging. I think an awareness and understanding would be great. That, like, people should definitely look into understanding all sorts of presentations of autism and different things that can help. Understanding of sensory environments, what sensory overload is, different processing speeds, and like processing of different information. So like one of the things at my church that I really like is we have handouts with our sermon. And for me, auditory processing is not my strongest way to process information. And if all my other senses are being tested, my auditory processing is very poor. But if I have a handout, I can see the points and it can help me anchor back into what's being said. And that's just understanding the content. That's not even thinking about kind of conversations and social stuff. But if you want me to understand what you're teaching in your sermon, give me a handout with some visuals on. And that's the sort of thing that can benefit loads of people for different reasons. I also think, a variety of outside of church activities, getting to know the profiles and needs of people inside your church, the way that their autism or neurodivergence or other needs might present themselves, and just having an awareness of that when you're planning things, when you're thinking things through. But I can tell you, one of the best things that anyone has ever done for me is there was a last minute change of venue for a church weekend away. And one of my friends was in the team that was sort of organising it. And she texted me and said, there's a last minute change. It's not where we normally go. I'm going to visit it. Like, what do you need to know to make this easier for you this weekend? And I was able to send all of my weird and wonderful requests, from what fabric are the chairs, not because I expect them to change the fabric of the chairs, but I will pack the right trousers.
That would be quite extreme.
Yeah, that's maybe not a reasonable accommodation, but I can dress so that I don't feel certain fabrics touching my legs. And if I know what the fabric is, I can be prepared for that. What's the lighting situation? Like, what's the dining hall like? Is it going to be echoey? Do I need to bring my earplugs? Can you hear any electricity anywhere in the building? Like, so many bizarre requests that I sent. And she answered all of them and let me know. And I was going to a new place and it was a last minute change, which are things that can really throw me and be difficult for me to process to then be able to enjoy the event. I had an idea of what I was heading into, and that really helped. And that was such an act of love and kindness and accommodation from my friend. So just thinking about the people in your congregation and what might help them, and asking them what will help you.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So important.
And that comes presumably out of a longer term friendship with that person as well, who had got to know you and got to understand your needs, even if they didn't know every single one of those needs, actually to ask you that question. And that's true for any accessibility, isn't it? Like, if we've got people with physical accessibility needs as well, like, what is it that you need? What's going to help you? Because sometimes it's not the things we think. Yeah. It's not just having a ramp up to the building. It's also thinking about, corners that a wheelchair needs to go round, or what bedroom they might be sleeping in, or that kind of thing. Thank you. I'm sure there's like loads more advice that you could give, but I won't make you sit here for an hour. Finally, you and friends of yours have written a book, Belonging Without Barriers. Yes. Is that the full title, or am I missing half of it?
So it's called Belonging Without Barriers, and then it has got a subtitle, Building Accessible Christian Community.
There we go. That's what it says on the tin. Would you just tell us a little bit about what that book is about and who it might be for?
Yeah, so it's a book for, I'd say, every Christian who belongs to Christian community. So anyone who goes to a church, anyone who goes to a youth group. It is basically, the first half of the book, we explore theology of disability and difference and why it is so key to who God is and what he loves that we think about these things, and just how important accessibility is and how we can see that running through the Bible. We can see belonging running through the Bible as a really key theme. Then the second half, so the first half slightly shorter. The second half then goes into a whole load of different diagnoses and experiences. It gives a sort of brief overview of that thing. So like there's an autism chapter, there's a bit explaining about autism. There's physical disabilities, we explain what a physical disability is. All sorts, like including old age related disabilities. But the exciting thing in those chapters is not just us explaining what it is, and it's not even just us saying, here's some tips of what you can do in your setting to help people. It's got people's stories in, so it's got all different things that have either been a real struggle or been done really well for different Christians across the UK, and that they've happily shared with us so that other people can think through accessibility and belonging for anyone with any additional need or disability.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I know that you guys you worked so hard on that. And I think your hearts have really gone into that. And I know it's something that as I said, I've listened to you talk about accessible toilets for the last 10 years. So I know that it was something you really, really cared about. So thank you so much for writing that. And yeah, hopefully that will help. Thank you so much for your thoughts and ideas around autism and Christianity and church and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, great. Thanks, Triona, so much for your time and your honesty and everything that you put into that. I really appreciate it. Really in depth for the time that you had. Just really useful. Is there anything you want to just draw out?
Yeah, obviously all of it was helpful. I think just what we talked about towards the end of kind of how we can talk to our churches and our leaders about these things, whether we ourselves need help accessing church or on behalf of somebody else or somebody in the future that we don't know yet. I just think it's a really great thing to start talking to your leaders about, even if you are young, even if you don't have somebody in mind that needs that access help with church. I think it's just a great thing to start thinking about and just start looking at around your church through the eyes of somebody who is not like you, and just really starting to ask those questions now so that you can talk to your leadership and kind of set things up for when somebody comes through the doors.
Yeah, absolutely. I really thought the whole episode was great, just generally helpful. And I think what you're saying is really good. And I think it expands generally that we as Christians have just a responsibility really to make sure that church in general and kind of life to an extent is accessible for people with disabilities, people who are neurodivergent, people with dyslexia that we stuff, and people who have depression or anxiety. The more we're kind of doing these interviews, the more we're talking to people about all these things, we should be advocating for them.
Absolutely. And of course, go and read Trina's book. Feel like we need to promote that. Belonging Without Barriers, Building Accessible Christian Community. So Thank you, Trina.
Go read the book. Cool. What we're looking at next week, Izzy?
Next week, we are talking about AI and the Christian.
AI.
So, can't wait for that one.
Hey.
Great. See you next week, Rob.
See you next week. Bye, Izzy. Bye, everyone.
Bye.